Hello everyone, Jonathan Ralph here. Now, yesterday, Portugal's parliament approved a major set of amendments to the nationality law. I know that's had many of you worried, and I would like to speak directly to that worry with some plain facts, some clear context, and some reasonable and calm next steps, which is what I believe the situation requires. Do bear in mind, however, this video is of course not legal advice. It's intended to be a clear and practical update that can help you understand the changes, what they might mean if you are an existing golden visa holder or a golden visa applicant, and what to expect next as the reform moves through the final stages before it can ultimately become law, which is important to know it has not happened yet. Firstly, and this is important, the parliamentary changes are not primarily a technical response to processing delays. The political push behind these amendments is driven by a perception among some lawmakers, among some of the Portuguese electorate, that Portugal has become too easily used as a route to a European passport. In short, that the system was being seen by some as a bit of a soft touch. Now, this package of reforms aims to tighten and clarify the rules around naturalisation and obtaining Portuguese nationality, to make the criteria more explicit, to strengthen integration requirements, and to lengthen the timelines, of course. Now, that's the major bone of contention for many of you watching this video. However, put simply, this is a political response intended to make the nationality framework more restrictive and quite clearly more conditional than it has been up to now. I know that some of the language used here can sound a little bit alarming. My role here is merely to explain what these political decisions may mean in practice, not to amplify the rhetoric. This is intended as a resource to help you make sense of some of the muddied waters. So, with that in mind, here are the main practical changes approved by the Portuguese Parliament yesterday, the ones that will affect foreign residents, including gold visa holders and applicants, if they do ultimately become law as currently drafted. And there is a little bit of a process that needs to be followed before we get to that stage. So, number one, longer residence periods for naturalisation. Now, the minimum residence period has increased substantially if our ultimate goal is to obtain citizenship. For most non-EU nationals, the period will rise from 5 years to 10 years. There is a smaller increase for what's known as the CPLP countries, so countries of Portuguese language, essentially, and other EU nationals as well, which will be subject to a 7-year timeline rather than 10. But the key point for most golden visa holders and applicants is that the route to nationality has been extended dramatically under the approved text. That's number one. Number two is when the clock starts ticking to nationality. Now, crucially, the counting of residence time, if this law goes through, will be measured from the date of issuance of the first residence card, not from the date that you submitted your application as things currently stand. Practically, that means that residence cards, practically that matters because residence cards are often issued a little bit of time after initial approval. It's been very exaggerated in recent years. Now, the government has indicated that applications submitted by the end of 2025 will be subject to a 12-month processing time going forward. It remains to be seen how that will bear out in practice, whether indeed that will be lived experience, but do know that that 12-month of processing time is now going to be essentially more time spent waiting before obtaining citizenship, as that time will now no longer count towards naturalisation. Number three, new cultural and civic knowledge requirements. So in essence, greater ties to Portugal when obtaining nationality. So beyond the existing language threshold, which, as those of you who've watched my videos in the past will know, is set at A2 level, applicants for citizenship will now need to demonstrate basic knowledge of Portuguese history, culture, national symbols, and civic duties. Essentially, it's a basic civic knowledge check in addition to the current language requirements. So just a little bit of a slightly higher hurdle in terms of proving your ties to the country. Number 4, tighter criminal eligibility rules. Now, we already knew coming into this that in order to access a golden visa, for example, you would need to have effectively a clean criminal record. Now, when we talk about citizenship, the threshold for a disqualifying condition has been lowered. So effectively, some offences that would not previously have blocked your route to naturalisation could now do so. It is now a tighter regime. So individuals on certain sanctions lists as well will also be excluded from nationality. So if you come from a problematic country in terms of international sanctions, that's definitely a criterion that is worth looking into if your end game here is citizenship. Point number 5, children born in Portugal and lineage rules. So previously, children did have the right to Portuguese nationality through birth under quite lax conditions. Now, children born in Portugal to foreign parents will face rather stricter conditions. Notably, at least one parent must have been a legal resident for a minimum of 5 years prior to the birth of the child in order for nationality through birth to be granted. And if you talk about grandchildren of Portuguese citizens, they must show language competence and familiarity with Portuguese culture and society for them to then be granted Portuguese naturalisation. Number 6 is the end of the Sephardic naturalisation route. So Sephardic Jews did have a specific route to naturalisation. That is now being formally closed, assuming again that the text moves forward as published. It does still need to go for presidential review, and the president may either directly ratify the text, send it back to Parliament using the power of his veto, or refer it to the constitutional courts for further checks. So that's number 6. Number 7, proof of financial capacity and other safeguards. So applicants for Portuguese citizenship will need to evidence sufficient financial means to support themselves, and marriage or partnership routes will face enhanced safeguards. So what does that mean? No serious criminal records, no security risk. Now, of course, when we start talking about financial capacity, this is obviously much less of a factor when we talk about the golden visa. But I do want to just make you aware as to all the major changes being discussed as pertains to the amendments in the nationality law. Okay, that's number 7. Number 8 in that case. Entry into force and transitional provisions. I know a lot of us in this space, and a lot of you, when speaking with people like me, talk about grandfather rights and ability to access previous versions of timelines and pathways to citizenship. Now, this draft determines that the changes that we're mentioning here would enter into force once published, and importantly, applications already submitted for citizenship should continue to be processed under the current 5-year rule. But the devil is in the detail of the final text, and any transitional measures that the president may require. Simply put, we simply do not know if grandfather rights will be extended to golden visa holders, people that already have their residence permit, or golden visa applicants that are still waiting for a reply from the Portuguese state. As it currently sits, grandfather rights are not planned to be offered in those scenarios, but only to those that have already qualified to apply for citizenship. Like I say, it remains to be seen what the final version of the legal amendments will look like, because we do not know until we have presidential ratification and ultimately promulgation. So what does all of this mean in plain terms? Well, number 1, and rather obviously, longer timelines. So if the law is enacted as approved, the pathway to nationality will be significantly longer to non-EU golden visa applicants, effectively doubling from 5 years to 10 years under the approved text. You can therefore expect a materially increased time frame before nationality becomes available to many applicants. Secondly, administrative timing matters more moving forward because the residency clock will essentially start ticking from the date of issue of the first residence card. That will be a particularly bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people that have been waiting for a significant amount of time to get that first residence card. We are seeing the green shoots now that the timeline to process that and achieve the first residence card should be significantly faster with a view to the future. But those of you or those people out there that have been waiting for significant periods of time to obtain their first residence card, that is a rather significant kick in the teeth. So all of this points to the fact that, of course, the issue date of the residence permit is far more important than it was previously because we can no longer depend on the time starting to tick from the date of application submission. It is now, to a degree, out of our control and back in the control of the immigration authority. Also, another consequence, of course, increased evidence of integration. We spoke about greater ties to Portugal. You will need to show a basic cultural or civic understanding in addition to the language requirement in order to become a naturalized Portuguese citizen. So make sure you plan for the practical steps to prepare for that assessment. Again, this is a strong caveat that assuming that the law goes through as approved by Parliament yesterday. Another consequence, of course, criminality checks being stricter, so the threshold for disqualification will be lowered. Stay rigorous about compliance, disclosures, and legal clarity. Do note that citizenship via the Golden Visa is, however, still eminently possible and viable. Timing and conditions are, of course, going to be different going forward. The Golden Visa as a residency route remains part of Portugal's international toolkit, and the permanent residence process, which we haven't yet touched on, remains an important option, and I will go on to describe that in just a moment, and that's quite an important reason as to why the Golden Visa remains viable in a significant number of cases. This law still needs the President's review and ratification, as I've mentioned on a couple of occasions in this video. Now, as I noted previously, the President may ratify it as it is, he may return it to Parliament for revision, or he may refer specific points to the Constitutional Court for specialist analysis and recommendations thereafter. Now, given the political division that we've seen in the Portuguese Parliament and the constitutional concerns raised during debates, which I referenced in my last video touching on Jorge Miranda and his opinion, father of the Portuguese constitution, of course, a presidential request for clarification or constitutional review of certain elements is quite possible. Historically, laws of this magnitude are often adjusted or clarified at this stage, so it may well be the case that history repeats itself here. So the contents of this video may well need to be updated once that has taken place, but I'm trying to give you an up-to-the-minute interpretation of everything that is currently occurring. With all that in mind, so although yesterday's parliamentary approval is, of course, a rather major step, it is not the final step in amending the law. So please do bear that in mind and take all of the content of this video and any other resources that you consume in the days ahead with that necessary context well considered. Now, if you are affected by any of these changes, either you already hold a Golden Visa or you find yourself in the middle of the process, here is what I would recommend to you right now. Firstly, do not panic. This is a recalibration of rules. It is not an immediate expropriation of any rights. That would be distinctly anti-Portuguese. The final legal text and any transitional measures will determine individual outcomes. So sit tight and wait to see the final version of that text once it has cleared the presidential ratification stage. Secondly, good practice for life. Document everything. Keep careful records of your application submission dates, your communications with your legal team, and thereafter with the immigration authority. The date that your residence card was issued, of course, rather rudimentary, but important information that you should be keeping on file, and check with your lawyers if you're not sure. Issuance date, of course, is a rather important milestone now in this process when viewed as a whole. Thirdly, make preparations for the integration checks, the ties to the country that we've just referenced. If you do ultimately hope to naturalize and become a Portuguese citizen, make sure that you begin, or if you've already begun, to continue preparing for those civic and language elements. So get to a basic level of Portuguese, either through the A2 level language test or the A2 level language course, plus start building some level of practical awareness of Portuguese institutions, symbols, and culture. A decent recommendation, regardless. If you are trying to naturalize to any country, you should be rather familiar with how that country works. So that is a pretty good rule for life. And of course, keep abreast of any major updates specifically look out for the presidential decision and the subsequent official publication in the Bulletin Nacional. Until the law is published in Diário da República, nothing is formally in force. That will be the date at which things do change. Now, transitional measures may protect those with applications already submitted. We have seen that before. It would not be the first time, and it would not be the first time that special niches have been carved out for golden visa holders specifically. So we do need to wait and see. Unfortunately, it is too early to say definitively what the future will look like there. So you will need to bear with Portugal in that regard. Now, if you need personalized guidance, I do, of course, recommend waiting for that final text first. There is not much that any advisor, including myself, can do other than providing as much or shedding as much light as we can on the situation as it currently sits and advocating as best we can in the relevant places. But ultimately, the letter of the law is, to a certain degree, outside of our control, and we need to wait to see exactly what the final legal amendments will look like. Now, once the law is published, once we have a degree of certainty as to what this will definitively look like and the impact it will have on gold visa applicants and holders, I will be issuing a further video update with a view to producing a practical piece of advice. Again, not legal advice, but generic information. Need to be very careful when we use that word, with a view to helping you navigate this situation. And for now, the best thing you can do is to stay informed, stay organized, and keep everything in order. Now, one important point as it pertains to stability, Portugal's permanent residency framework remains unchanged for now. Now, this is quite a critical point for those of you already on a golden visa journey. Why? Golden visa holders will still be able to apply for permanent residency under the existing conditions once the relevant 5-year period tied to the first residence card has passed. So you spend the first 5 years on an initial temporary golden visa, so golden visa temporary residence, after which time you can then transition onto golden visa permanent residence. Now, permanent residence continues to offer significant rights and flexibility, and in many cases remains a practical final status for investors who prefer certainty over nationality timing. But it can also serve as a bridge between the initial golden visa temporary residence, the golden visa that's issued to you after you make your investment, and ultimately citizenship. A key characteristic of permanent residence is that under permanent residence, you will be able to withdraw your golden visa investment and therefore recover your capital and your gains. You will also only have a 7-day per year physical stay requirement under your permanent residence to ultimately achieve citizenship. If you're not ultimately aiming to achieve citizenship, then that stay requirement is actually significantly less if your goal is simply to retain permanent residence. You just need to visit the Portuguese territory at least once every rolling 24-month period. That being said, 7 days per year is still rather a low hurdle when it comes to ultimately achieving a passport and a citizenship. So even though we are now talking about a significantly longer time frame to obtaining a citizenship and naturalized status, doing 5 years on the golden visa temporary residence and then, for example, 5 years on golden visa permanent residence before transitioning onto citizenship may still be an interesting route for many of you watching this video. Now, I fully understand how stressful this may be for many of you watching. It's one of the reasons I wanted to produce this video, was to give you a modicum of clarity. Changes of this kind touch not only financial planning matters, because the Golden Visa is not an insignificant amount of money for the vast majority of people embarking upon the scheme, but family plans, long-term security, and ultimately where people imagine their lives unfolding. Now, if you're feeling anxious today, that reaction is entirely natural and it's legitimate. Do, however, bear in mind that under the Golden Visa, you do have the rights to live in Portugal or not. It is your decision, and those rights remain unchanged, regardless of whether you're on Golden Visa temporary residence, Golden Visa permanent residence, or citizenship. The main benefit of citizenship is that it opens up the entirety of the EU Schengen area for you to ultimately live, work, study, retire, and move and live in any one of the other member states in the European Union. Your rights to Portugal remain broadly unaffected by the changes that are taking place. To summarize briefly and to wrap this up for today, Parliament has approved major amendments that will lengthen timelines to naturalisation and tighten integration and eligibility criteria for citizenship. The counting rule now looks to start from the date of issuance of the residence permit themselves, rather than the date of the application submission of the Golden Visa. And for most non-EU nationals, the residence threshold in the approved text has now risen to 10 years. The law still needs presidential review and formal publication. There may be some bumps in the road before it gets there. We need to wait and see. There therefore remain steps where the text could be clarified or altered. No one knows for sure what the final version will be just now. All we know is the version that has been approved by Parliament. For now, my recommendation is to stay informed, keep your documentation in order, start any language or civic preparation that you believe sensible in the context of the framework that I've just outlined, and most importantly, stay tuned for further updates. That can be via this channel or via the myriad of other sources that remain available to you online. That's all from me for now. Thank you for listening, and I will be in touch again very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye for now.